There are people who delete a photo 17 times before they ever come close to posting it. And then they just don't. Not because the photo was bad, but because something deep inside their brain quietly said no, and they couldn't explain why. That invisible no has a name, and it says a lot more about how your mind works than you might expect. Think about it for a second. You take a photo, maybe it's actually a good one. The lighting is decent, you look happy, it was a genuinely great moment. You open Instagram or Facebook, you're about to post it, and then you stop, you close the app. You tell yourself, maybe later, but later never comes. This happens to millions of people, and most of them quietly assume something is wrong with them, that they're too insecure, too shy, too self-conscious. But here's the strange part. The psychology behind this behavior is far more complex than simple insecurity. And in many cases, it has nothing to do with insecurity at all. Psychologists who study self-perception and digital identity have identified something called self-discrepancy anxiety. This is the discomfort that lives in the gap between how you see yourself on the inside and how you fear others might see you on the outside. When you post a photo online, you're not just sharing an image, you're submitting yourself for public evaluation. And for certain people, that feeling is genuinely unbearable, not because they're fragile, but because their brain has learned to treat social judgment the exact same way it treats physical danger. And this is where things get really interesting. The part of your brain that activates when you sense a physical threat, the amygdala, fires in the exact same way when you anticipate social rejection. Researchers have found that for people who consistently avoid posting photos, even imagining putting themselves out there online triggers a measurable stress response. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a real threat and a stranger's critical comment. The reaction is identical. It's ancient survival wiring running inside a very modern world. Now here's the thing. This isn't just shyness. Psychologists have identified several distinct personality profiles behind this behavior. Some people have what's called a high self-monitoring personality. They are constantly, almost exhaustingly aware of how they're being perceived, and they've learned that the safest way to control their image is to simply never share one. Others are driven by something called anticipated regret. Their brain is so skilled at simulating worst-case scenarios that they've already lived through the embarrassment, the criticism, the awkwardness, before the photo is even posted. The decision feels made before they've consciously thought it through. And then there's a third group, one that surprises most people. Some individuals avoid posting not out of fear, but out of a deep, almost philosophical commitment to psychological privacy. For them, a photo isn't just a photo, it's a window into their world. And they have absolutely no interest in opening that window for strangers to look through. Here's the moment that tends to stop people in their tracks. Most of us automatically assume that the person who never posts must be struggling with low self-esteem. That's the easy explanation, but the research tells a more nuanced story. Studies on self-awareness and emotional sensitivity suggest that many non-posters actually score higher on measures of self-awareness than frequent posters do. They're not hiding because they feel worthless. They're protecting something they consider deeply personal, their sense of self, kept clean and untouched by outside opinion. Think about how this shows up in everyday life. You probably know someone who takes beautiful photos on vacation but never shares a single one publicly. Or a friend who looks genuinely happy in pictures but always says, "Don't post that." Or maybe you've caught yourself lying in bed at night, overthinking a photo you posted 3 years ago, and you decided a long time ago it was easier to just not go through that again. This also connects to something psychologist Carol Dweck's research touched on: the difference between people who ground their identity in internal values versus people who rely on external validation. When your sense of self doesn't depend on likes, comments, or outside approval, the whole concept of posting photos starts to feel almost pointless, performative even, like voluntarily handing someone a piece of yourself to evaluate. And a lot of people, quietly and privately, have decided that trade-off simply isn't worth it. What all of this really reveals is something quietly profound about human nature. Every single one of us is navigating the same invisible tension, the desire to be seen and the need to feel safe. For some people, those two things can peacefully coexist in the digital world. For others, the cost of that visibility is simply too high, and so they make a choice that feels increasingly rare in today's world. They choose quiet. They choose invisibility. They choose to own their own image, completely on their own terms. And honestly, that's not a flaw. That's not something that needs to be corrected or overcome. And so they make a choice that feels increasingly rare in today's world. They choose quiet. They choose invisibility. They choose to own their own image, completely on their own terms. And honestly, that's not a flaw. That's not something that needs to be corrected or overcome. It might actually be one of the most self-aware choices a person can make. If you find the hidden logic behind human behavior as fascinating as this, consider subscribing. There's a lot more going on inside the mind than most people ever get the chance to hear about.